the chakras explained, the truth about the chakras. Look, I'm not a type of person that uses teleprompting and stuff like that if you're new to my channel. So I've got my notes here just to make sure I get the information 100% accurate. Let's get on with this. So we know the chakras. Chakra means wheel, chakra means disc. But what we have to understand about the chakras, and what we're going to go through in this video, is what we can take from traditional Eastern yogic and tantric philosophies compared to modern ideas of the Western world that have been stuck on top of them, which really have no foundation. They've just used them to make things easier for the Western mind to understand. Yeah? Okay, let's get into this. So, chakra means disc or wheel. It is a metaphysical energy center, or we could say a focal point in the spine that when we focus on certain aspects of these, it can help us let the energy flow for an awakening. Call this spiritual awakening, but more importantly, a Kundalini awakening. This is what the channel is about, Kundalini awakening, because a true spiritual awakening is a Kundalini awakening. Now we have these points or centers that we could, in English, call them almost gates. So there are things we have to work through for the energy to flow clearly. This is very important because the Western ideas change this, and it takes us away from what they are about. Now, just like we have these focal points or gates to flow through, we also have, from the Taoist philosophies and traditions, we have 3 Dantians that coincide very nicely with the granthis of yoga, which are the knots. Now, the Dantians are energy reservoirs. And this is why they are very important to connect them into the yogic philosophies, because we have reservoirs and gates, reservoirs and gates. Between the reservoirs, we have knots that need to be opened. So then we take that away. We then just have reservoir with a gate. There are more gates than reservoirs. This is why it's so important to combine the 2 techniques to make a Kundalini awakening safe. So what is the difference between that, which is the Eastern idea, and the Western idea? The Western idea for chakras is they basically turn them into emotional points of well-being. Yeah. When I say it like that, it just sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? But there's more to it. Because the chakras, let's use the 7 chakra system, have 7 colors. The colors of the rainbow. Yeah, you know this. You've been taught this. You've learned this, right? Each chakra has a rainbow color. Is that a yogic understanding or is that Western? Well, it's actually a Western idea. It's absolute nonsense, really, when it comes to pure yogic traditions. There are a few yogic traditions that have taught colors, and tantric traditions which have taught colors in relation to the chakras. Nothing to do with the rainbow. The rainbow colors actually come from 1927 from Leadbeater's work called the Chakras. This is the first place where we see the rainbow colors associated with the chakras. And this was then hammered home, believe it or not, in 1987, so nothing ancient about this, that Anodea Judith was her name. She took this idea from 1927, another Western idea, and really drove this home as a visual framework. As a visual framework to help us remember there are 7 chakras. That's it. That is the only relationship. But wait, let's go a little bit further. Because we also have the 7 Solfeggio frequencies that perfectly align with the chakras. And we have all this music and these singing bowls in sound healing that they're tuned to the chakras, right? Well, actually, the Solfeggio frequencies were really popularized in the 1990s by Joseph Puleo and Leonardo Holowitz. 1990s. When the Solfeggios came out, there weren't actually 7, there were 6. They actually had to create the 7th in the scale to make them fit with the chakras. Now, I have actually, personally, I went out and I tested this with people. And so what I did, for people that claim to have their chakras activated, I went out and I played each frequency, and they didn't know what frequency was playing. And I'm like, which chakra does this associate to? Which can you feel the vibration? And I'm not talking about random people. I'm talking about people who have done a lot of work on their chakras. Was there a correlation with the Solfeggio frequencies in my experiment when they didn't know what the tune was they were hearing and the chakra that reacted to it? Well, there was no correlation. So, do the Solfeggios fit the chakras? In the test that I did, scientific testing, no one knew, they just had to relate, there was no correlation. There are different frequencies that I also tested that had a high correlation to the chakras. That was very interesting. But that's another topic. The Solfeggios, there was no frequency. There was no correlation. If you are interested, get the tune, get the tones, get some people that know about the chakras, play them and tell them to say, right, which one does this vibrate in? Test it for yourself. Do the scientific testing and see whether you get a high correlation of sound to chakra. Make sure they don't know which one it is and see what it is, because there is no correlation. So, first of all, the rainbow colors. Simply to remember there are 7. We don't need them anymore. It's a Western idea. The Solfeggios, there is no correlation between them and the chakras. Absolute nonsense. So now, this is the really important truth about the chakras. We have emotions tied to each chakra, right? So in Eastern philosophy, the chakras have obstacles to open the gates. We need to do this. We need to overcome certain obstacles to be able to do things safely. So for example, the root chakra. I'm just going to use the Western names for the chakras. We need to overcome fear before opening the root chakra. This is, let's say, if you overcome fear, the root chakra opens? No. If you work on fear, will it open the root chakra? No. It is something we must overcome before we open the root chakra. Because if we open the root chakra, talking about Kundalini, if Kundalini then surges and we have not overcome fear, this is when we run into problems fast. So it's not overcome fear and it magically opens. No, it is something that has to be done to be able to use the chakras and have the flow of Shakti flow safely. It's a huge difference. So if we look at these two things, we say, in the East, you must overcome fear, then we can activate the root chakra. In the West, and again, where do the Western ideas come from? Again, they were popularized. Basically, we're talking again 1987 by, again, Judith, but also by Caroline Myss, or Mice, however you say it. We got a little bit of Jungian archetypes in there as well, which can sort of flow in. But so the root chakra, we must overcome fear before we go to open the root chakra. In the West, the root chakra is related to survival, security, and physical health, and financial stability. What? Why? If I open my root chakra, I suddenly have financial stability? Go and ask the yogis sitting in the caves if that's true. It offers me security, physical health, survival. What? And you notice, as we go up this, we're actually just talking about, in the West, we're talking about the basic emotions growing up, the derivative emotions, and again, they've just overplanted them on the chakras. And so it all fits in neatly for self-help and nothing to do with it. So then the second chakra, according to Eastern tradition, traditional Eastern tradition, we need to transcend desire, for divine creativity to occur. We need to transcend desire for divine creativity to occur. And this has suddenly turned into the West. The second chakra is involved in creativity, sexuality, and emotional expression. We must overcome desire, suddenly becomes, it's all about creativity. This, you see? The third one. For a safe Kundalini awakening at the third gate, at the third chakra, we need to burn egoic impurities, pride, anger. This comes through discipline, for example. We are talking about the shadows we need to work on to make a Kundalini awakening safe. So we go back to overcoming fear, transcending desire, breaking down the ego. For anyone who has had Kundalini experiences, rising experiences, you know how important this is. However, in the Western idea, we're talking about the third chakra. Obviously, third chakra, we're talking the solar plexus. We're talking about, it has to do with self-esteem, personal power, and confidence. Really? The stomach, the solar plexus area is personal power, self-esteem, and confidence? Why? Why is confidence and self-esteem in the solar plexus? The fourth chakra, the heart. The heart, in the Eastern philosophies, is about cultivating Bhakti, cultivating divine love and unity, unconditional love. Nothing to do with loving another person, falling in love. No, it's talking about openness, awe, divine unity and love, connection with the one. Again, for opening the Kundalini fully and safely, to be able to, once Shakti rises, to connect to Shiva. And in the West, this has turned into, oh, well, it's all about love, relationship, and emotional balance. Emotional balance is in the heart, or emotional balance is in the stomach. When you get nervous, when you become slightly emotionally unbalanced, you get butterflies in your heart or in your stomach. When you feel emotionally unstable, let's say anger, you feel that in the heart? Really? You see how much nonsense there is in the West with the chakras? We're going to keep going. We're now getting up to the throat chakra. We must align our speech with divine truth. Not our truth, not our egoic truth, not what we think, because the egoic, that's 2 chakras down. So if you're still talking from egoic points of view, when you get to the throat, it's nothing to do with the throat. You got to go down again. You got to go and deal with it down there. When we align our speech with divine truth, which means non-egoic, again, we get, when Shakti rises, we have the ability to connect to Shiva. Anything less than this is going to stop a full Kundalini awakening. We can have a Kundalini Shakti rising experience. We can get into trouble. We can have dark night of soul. We can get worse. This is what we're talking about with the chakras. We're, of course, in the West. The throat is about communication and authentic self-expression. Well, obviously, the voice has to do with communication, and authentic self-expression, which literally says self-expression means talking from the ego. So it's gone from non-egoic aligning speech to divine truth to authentic egoic expression. Do I need to say more? The lies, the myths, the misguidance the West has taught us about the chakras and the Kundalini. I mean, it's amazing. So we go on to the third eye. In the East, it is about awakening intuition and divine discernment. Discernment, not opinion. Not egoic opinion, because again, if it's egoic, if it's making a decision, we've got to go all the way back down, to the solar plexus. We still haven't dealt with it. Where in the West, intuition, it is mental clarity. Okay. And decision making. Decision making is in the third eye. But we have 3 places to think. I know it's right. I can feel it in my gut. So why is the third eye involved in decision making? I feel from the bottom of my heart this is just the right decision. We have the expressions, and yet the West still thinks it's the third eye to do with decision making. So they're partially right with intuition. But in the West, it is about awakening intuition and learning discernment to allow free flow of the Kundalini, and we are getting here Kundalini Shakti, and we are getting very close to Shiva or consciousness. And then we get the 7th chakra, the crown chakra. In the East, achieving union with the universal consciousness, Brahman, through the connection to Shiva, consciousness. Collective consciousness, Shiva, universal consciousness, Brahman. Upon achieving union, once we have risen the energy of Shakti, and we have achieved union with Brahman, Shakti can now be connected, descend to complete the second part of a Kundalini awakening. Where in the West, it's saying crown chakra is connected to spirituality. They're all connected to spirituality. Purpose. Egoic purpose, divine purpose. And, okay, universal connection. Yeah, most people don't even get that one. But purpose, self-purpose, egoic purpose, or universal divine purpose? Purpose? Really? At this stage? At this stage, it isn't purpose connected to the heart? The myths of the West superimposed on the Eastern philosophies of the chakras, which can be empowered by the reservoirs of the Dantians energetically. Forget, if you are seeking a spiritual awakening, a Kundalini awakening, forget all the Western ideas. The things that need to be overcome before the free and safe flow of the energy that need to be worked on, as opposed to the personal emotional connection between them. Absolute nonsense. The colors, there's no relationship. It's a Western idea to help us remember. And the Solfeggios, again, there is no correlation. Go run the experiment yourself. We have to dissolve these Western myths. They come from trying to intellectualize things and make it my own, and we see it every day with these things. The energy healing world, there are different levels of energy, and as soon as we get one system of healing in the West, in the capitalist society, you suddenly get all these different brands naming it for themselves, and these different names of star this and whatever that, and when they're very simple, talking about the energies, Qi, medical Qigong, pranic healing with all the activations, Reiki, Qi, Qi, Prana, it's Qi, Prana, it's Qi, Prana. We have the Tantric, which is the Jing, the essence, the sacred sexual energies. And then we have, once we have overcome the obstacles that we can find within those gates, within those discs, we can awaken the next frequency of energy, which is the Kundalini, which is the cosmic energy found in not the microcosmic orbit. The micro is the pranic, or the Qi, the Jing, the essence, the Shen within the system, to the cosmic macro orbit. Macro, cosmic, Kundalini, connecting to universal consciousness, Brahman, connecting to the collective consciousness, Shiva, via energy, Shakti. Please share this video with anyone that relates the solfeggios to the chakras, the colors to the chakras, the personal self-help to the chakras of the Western world, because they're basically going down rabbit holes that have no correlation whatsoever when we really get into the deep, the tantric, the yogic practices of these energy flows. See you in another video. And don't forget to subscribe if you like the video, and feel free to leave a comment.